Hi, I'm Shay.
And I'm Ken.
And we're here from the Groundworker Training Program to teach you about chainsaw maintenance.
Today we're going to go over some general maintenance with the chainsaws and how to keep them in optimal performance. A chainsaw that is running correctly is a lot safer for the operator and reduces fatigue on the operator and on the chainsaw itself.
When maintaining a chainsaw, make sure you're always following the manual that comes with it. If you find any defects with the saw, make sure that you are locking out that saw and writing on it what is wrong with it so that it can be fixed. Also tell a supervisor. When using a battery chainsaw, when the battery is in the chainsaw, it is always live. So make sure that you're taking out the battery before you maintain it. The next main safety feature of a chainsaw is the throttle interlock, seen right here. This is the throttle, this button at the bottom, and at the top we have the interlock. To engage the chain in the field, with the chain brake off, you would press both of these at once. The chain should be spinning. If your hand is not on the throttle interlock, the chain should not be spinning. If it is, the carburetor needs to be adjusted. To make sure that the throttle interlock is working properly, you want to engage the throttle. If you press on the throttle alone, the chain should not be spinning. The interlock needs to be engaged as well to make the chainsaw work. The throttle interlock does not look the same on all chainsaws. On this battery chainsaw, the interlock is this button on the side. Both that button and the throttle need to be engaged to spin the chain.
Another major safety feature or component of the chainsaw is this master control switch. This is going to be used during the starting and stopping procedure of the chainsaw. For this particular model, we want to put it into the start mode, which is the triangle that you'll see in the bottom. To do that, we actually can't push that down without pressing that throttle interlock that Shay just went over. So when we press that throttle interlock, we can put it into the start mode. When we start this saw, it's going to make a sound similar to this. And that's because we're giving it throttle and the brakes on. Within 3 seconds, we want to blip this up to the run mode so that we're not wearing that brake band down. So here, if you watch, the master control switch is going to go from the start to the idle mode. Again, it's kind of counterintuitive because we tend to want to take that brake off, but if we take that brake off, the chain's going to be spinning. We want to put it into the idle mode.
On this model over here, the master control switch is in the same spot, but when you are using the chainsaw first thing in the morning and it's cold, you need to use this primer. And then the master control switch actually comes out and up to go into starting position. Again, after 3 seconds at the maximum, you want to blip the saw to put it down into running mode. Located under this cover here is the air filter. When you are using a chainsaw, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day when you clean it, you want to be checking your air filter and cleaning it. This is your air filter. What it does is when the saw is pulling in air, the air filter filters that air so it's not pulling anything large into the carburetor, which could damage the engine of the saw. When you're looking at it, you want to make sure that there's no holes in it and that it's not excessively dirty. To clean it, you can gently tap it out on a table or use a clean toothbrush, not with any oil or anything on it, to clean out those little folds inside there. If the air filter is excessively dirty, you can clean it using warm soapy water. To put it back on, you want to make sure that it is completely dry.
To access the air filter on this saw, we take the cover off. This air filter just comes off with an easy twist, and like Shay said, just tap it or use a toothbrush. While we're in here, we can check out the summer-winter setting. So the summer-winter setting either blocks heat of the engine from getting in around the air filter or allows that heat to pass in. So you have a snowflake and a sunshine. Basically, this open gap allows that heat to pass in, and the closed gap blocks it. Around 10 degrees is what you're looking at for this. So if you're at 10 degrees or less, you want to make sure you're in the winter mode. 10 degrees and above, you want to block that heat from accessing the air filter. If you get above 20 degrees, you're really going to be overheating your engine and causing potential problems. It is always around the air filter. Sometimes it can be tricky to find. We're still rather cold out, so we're going to keep that in the winter mode. And while we're here, we can check out our spark plug here. So our spark plug we change annually. You want to look at the owner's manual to get the model of the spark plug and make sure you're using one specific for the chainsaw that you're using. Placing that boot back on or making sure you have a good connection, you'll actually feel a little pop as you place it in there and snaps into place.
Here at the front of the saw is the muffler. You want to make sure that the muffler is cool before you touch it. They get very hot when you're using a chainsaw. You want to make sure that all of the nuts and bolts are properly in place, including on the bumper spikes right here. At the front here is also the spark arrestor screen. You want to make sure that that is in place. If the spark arrestor screen is not there, sparks can actually come out and ignite anything around you. Before using a chainsaw, you want to make sure that it's properly oiled and gassed. Up here is the oil reservoir. Consult your owner's manual to see what kind of oil you need to use, but ideally you want to use eco oil because when you are operating a chainsaw, it's lubricating the chain from this reservoir, and that oil actually comes off of the chain and can go into the soil. So ideally, you want to use something that is good for the environment as well. At the back here is our fuel reservoir. Chainsaws are two-stroke engines and therefore take 50-to-1 mixture of high-octane fuel, the 50, to 1 part of two-stroke engine oil. You also want to make sure that there are no cracks or anything in the reservoirs and the saw isn't excessively leaking. All chainsaws leak a little bit.
Another feature of the chainsaw that I really like is called the anti-vibration system. And what that does is it separates the power head from the handle, the part that you're holding here. And that's really important because this is creating a lot of vibration, and if we were to have that just go directly to our hands, we could have what's called white finger disease or Raynaud's disease. So what it is we have spring and rubber mounted anti-vibration systems throughout this saw. And what can happen is when you're filling up the saw, the fuel can dry out those rubber mounts, make them stiff, and if we overfill the oil reservoir, that can make them soft, and this can create an inconsistent cut. The spring mounts, we also want to make sure that they're not cracked or fatigued, and just a good thorough inspection of that makes a big difference in this saw.
When you're filling these two reservoirs, you want to clean out around the edges so that you're not getting any dirt or sawdust inside the reservoirs. Every year, you also want to make sure that you're checking the filters inside of each of these reservoirs so none of that gunk is getting into the saw itself. One of the main safety features of a chainsaw is the chain brake or front handguard. You want to check the chain brake for any defects like cracks. when you're checking the chain brake to see if it's working or not, you want to disengage it and make sure that the chain spins. When the chain brake is engaged, the chain should not spin. Another feature of the chain brake is the inertia brake. When the chainsaw receives a violent force, the inertia brake should automatically engage the chain brake. To check whether the inertia brake is working or not, you can remove the chain brake and from about waist height, drop the tip of the bar onto a piece of wood. This should automatically engage the chain brake.
Two other major safety features on a chainsaw is the chain catcher pin, which is usually a soft metal like a white metal or aluminum or sometimes plastic. And this is a part that's often missing but plays a really important role in safety, because if this chain does derail and come off the bar, it changes the pivot point from here to here. And that makes a big difference, because that's the difference between that chainsaw wrapping around that chain catcher pin or coming back and hitting you in the rear hand. This brings us to another safety feature, the rear handguard, which we kind of take for granted, but this rear handguard is there designed to protect your hand if that chain does come off. And we want to check to make sure there's no cracks or defects in that as well.
When you're cleaning the chainsaw, the next thing that you want to look at is the clutch cover. So when you take off the clutch cover, you want to make sure that the chain brake is off always first. And then you're going to use a scrunch to loosen these bar nuts off. Then you can loosen that chain by using the other end of the scrunch in this little hole here. As I loosen it, you can see that the chain actually comes down. Now I will take off the rest of the clutch cover here, and we can take a look inside. So inside the clutch cover, it looks like this. This is a pretty clean saw. Usually they don't look like this. So you can take off your chain and bar to be cleaned later, and take a look in here. So when you're cleaning the inside of the saw, a useful tool is a toilet brush like this, and you can just brush away any gunk that's accumulated on the inside. Here, this little line is the oil reservoir connection. You want to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to block the oil from coming out and lubricating the chain and the bar. This is the sprocket. When you look at the sprocket, you want to make sure that there's no more than 0.5 millimeters of wear on that sprocket, or the chainsaw will not work properly anymore. This here is your clutch. How the chain brake works is when you engage it, like so, your sprocket will no longer spin. So your chain is no longer spinning. When you take off your chain brake, your sprocket and your clutch can spin again. If we look at the side cover of this other chainsaw, you can actually see this brake band, is what it's called in here, disengage, and so it expands away from the clutch right here. And then when you engage the chain brake, it actually squeezes on that clutch, so it's not going to spin anymore.
Moving into the bar, we want to do some maintenance on the bar. So we have a couple of parts here that we need to identify. These two larger holes here, these match up with your tensioner pin, which on this saw is right here. So how you tension the saw is the pin matches up with these holes and either moves the bar forwards to tighten it or backwards to loosen it. The small hole on the saw is where the oil port matches up, and that's where the oil then transfers into the bar, lubricating the bar, the sprockets, and the chain. We want to make sure that these parts are all clean, and it is symmetrical. It's symmetrical because you want to flip the bar so that you get even wear with your bar. What I like to do first is feel if there's any burring on that bar. If there's any burring, we want to take care of that with a flat file. Working our way down from the nose sprocket down, taking those off. If it's really bad, we have these awesome bar dressers that come in at 90 degrees, and they work really well at taking any of those burrs off. Not only the burrs on the side, but any unevenness in our rails here as well. From that stage, because we could get some file shavings in there, there's also going to be some bar oil and sawdust in there. Going from the nose sprocket down, we're going to take this bar dresser. And how the bar dresser works is this little hook here gets right into those grooves. So getting right into those grooves, any of that guck or dirt in there, look at that. Oh, that's very satisfying. Is it just me? I love that. So we're cleaning all that guck that can get hardened off in there, all those file shavings, making sure that we get into those oil ports and cleaning those out. And that's how we maintenance our bars.